This is how to prepare for the cookieless future, in quotes. So thank you all for joining. We have myself and Derek Cavaliero here. Derek is Director of Engineering. He's been slicing and dicing front end, back end, tracking pixels, JSON dumps, GTM containers, and analytics customizations since 2010. So for those counting at home, that's 12 years of doing web, data measurement, tracking, building, etc. And then myself, Arsham Mirshah, the integrator at WebMechanix. That is an EOS term for the president, the CEO, whatever, it doesn't matter. But I've been mixing computer science, marketing, advertising, business, strategy, and operations in a cauldron of my own since 2009. So kind of, we've been on the forefront of this stuff for a long time. So let's jump right in and quick background, like what is a cookie, right? You're going to need to know this for context for everything else. So very simply, a cookie is just a piece of data that is stored on your browser. Why is it, why is it there? The most common use case is to identify you, right? And why do you need to be identified? Well, typically it's used for improving your site experience two ways. One is to improve your site experience. So this is like you come back to a site, you're already logged in, or you have certain preferences or personalizations. Maybe you have some stuff in your shopping cart. That stuff works off of cookies. And also it's to track your behavior across the internet to ultimately show you targeted adverts. I use adverts because I wanted to flex my UK muscles for a minute, right? Or my EU muscles. Some people ask in this case, like, what about IP address? I'm trying to be funny here. IP address, I share my IP address with everyone at the office, or when I'm at home, I share it with my wife, and my wife and I don't have the same interests. So it would not be good for her to see, ads of things that I'm interested and vice versa. So cookies on your browser, right? But then there's first party and then there's third party cookies. So what we're talking about with this cookieless future refers to third party cookies being eliminated. And we'll go into that in a moment. But for more context, first party cookies are made by the site that you're visiting. So again, like these are just there to improve your experience. So, returning users can be kept logged into a site. Like it would not be fun if every time you went to, Facebook, right, you'd have to log in every time. That'd be kind of annoying. So a cookie helps like keep you logged in, or your shopping cart, or your language, your language and text size preferences. All those things are stored in a cookie and help improve your experience. The good news is that these first party cookies can be read only by the site that put them on there, right? So that's the good news. You'll see that on the next slide. So, and then they're also considered essential, and some are non-essential in data privacy eyes. We'll get into that as well. But basically, like that's just legal stuff for now. We don't need to get into the technical details there. So now third-party cookies, these are the ones that are kind of in the spotlight, are going away very soon. They are made by scripts and images that are loaded on the sites that you're visiting, and they're used to track you across the web, right? So they help identify you so they can like build a profile on you. And ultimately they're going to like watch to see what you do across the internet. They're going to see what you buy, what websites you visit, things like that. So they're building a profile, right? They're understanding who you are, what you're interested in, and then they go and they sell that data to advertisers to show targeted ads, right? So, the typical example is, you're looking for a vacation, you want to go to Cancun, you don't ultimately book it, and then every ad you see on the internet is flights and hotels and packages to Cancun, right? So that's sort of what's happening with third-party cookies. They're understanding what you're doing to show you ads. The bad news is that they can be read well, not, I mean, you understand, right? They can be read across the website. So in this example, you have website 1, website 2, website 3. They all, load an ad from adserver.com, and adserver.com now knows that you've been on website 1, 2, and 3, as well as other websites, across the web. But website 1 doesn't know that you've been there, but been to 2 and 3, and 2 doesn't know about 3 and 1, but ad server knows all about that activity. And so they're building that profile on you. And, privacy advocates say that's creepy. I get it, makes sense as a user. Also, like, there's been cases where your actual email address and first name has been stored in those cookies. And so that's like very risky behavior. You can't have personal identifiable information stored on, your browser for anyone, for like hackers hypothetically to get to, right? So you can see why that's bad. It's kind of risky, and it's not, anyhow, you can see why that's not ideal. And so that's what's in the crosshairs, right? So they're going away. They're going away. And it's what's happening, why we're doing this webinar now, is because Google, who has the majority of the market share for the browsers, that's Google Chrome. I would love to know, like, who all out there, what browsers you all use, but in lieu of stopping this to do a poll, I'd imagine that you're in the majority. Might not be, but yeah, over 60% of people use Chrome, and Google has announced that by 2022, crossed out because they've extended it to 23, and then they extended it again to 2024. Can tell you why. They have announced that they're going to be blocking third-party cookies by default. So that's why this is a big deal. And you'll see what changes because of that, right? And the main reason that they're doing this is because they see that, they keep getting probed first and foremost, right? By EU, mostly Google, that is, and they keep getting fined, they keep getting probed and investigated. And also they see the data privacy laws are coming, right? So EU has its e-privacy regs, there's GDPR, there's CCPA. CCPA is the one in California, and I think New York has one in the works. So anyhow, they see the future is one of more privacy first internet browsing, and so they have announced that Google Chrome will automatically block third-party cookies by 2024. I had something, actually, here we go. Okay, so I want to real quickly put this in there, though. Google stands to gain from this. So they know their position. They know that they have Google Chrome, the browser. They know they have AdSense to help publishers monetize. And they also see that the data privacy and regulation trends are moving in the direction of privacy first, right? So instead of letting someone else come up with the replacement for third-party cookies, Google's trying to create that next technology themselves, right? So that's, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but their privacy sandbox, Flock, which is dead now, and there's now this topics thing, all details that if you want to get into, raise your hand, let me know. But really, Google's probably going to get stronger coming out of this. So even though they're the ones with the market share, and they're raising their hand saying, yeah, we hear you, we see the future, we're going to comply or whatever, they're also going to be the ones that are going to benefit. And that's because they're going to be handicapping their competitors by limiting access to this data, and then under the guise of kind of this user-first, privacy-focused update. So that's a little bit of an opinion, but also, frankly, a fact. So
yeah, and you have to think about it from Google's shoes too. Well, the title of the slide is pretty apparent of that, right? Sorry, it's 9 a.m. here on the West Coast, so my brain is not firing on full cylinders yet this morning. Thinking about it is Google makes most of their money off of advertising. They're not going to just like go, oh, third-party cookies are gone. Now all your things that needed the third-party cookies for like all of your audience building and everything like that are just going to go away. That's why that date keeps getting pushed back habitually, because they don't have something to replace it. And it's one of those situations where it's like the best person to replace that technology is the ad tech provider themselves, because they know how it needs to work, rather than just like this third-party company trying to create like something that works for all ad tech vendors.
That's true,
because they don't know the like how that data is used behind the scenes, because that's one of the things about these third-party cookies is that they get passed around like hotcakes. Anytime you visit a news site, like let's say the New York Times, and they have all their banner ads and stuff, all those cookies and all that information is being transferred behind the scenes. You're not aware of it, but it knows who you are, assuming that you haven't cleared your cookies out since the last time you visited, right? So that's kind of like the stuff that it's this weird situation where we know this thing's going away and we're being told that it's like doomsday scenario, but at the same time, the people that are buying, or the companies that are buying the advertising space on these third-party sites, whether it's the New York Times or whatever, the only control we have, and we're going to get into this, is based off of what options the ad tech providers give to us. There's nothing that the advertiser themselves, be it WebMechanix or whoever's running or paying for these ads, can do to skirt the third-party situation, because the data is set and controlled by the third party. It's nothing that you can do in a first-party context. So it's kind of like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? Because you can't do anything until
as an advertiser, right? If you're paying for display ads, search ads, whatever, like you're kind of quote unquote beholden to the solutions that are created, right? That's what Derek is saying.
Right.
Now there are some stuff you can do, and that's like the we're going to get there. Claire asked a question: what kind of technology are they coming up with? Something that's trying to mimic third-party cookies? Yes and no. Yes, they are creating technology to replace the functionality of third-party cookies in a privacy-first type of way, in a secure, private type of way. So the functionality again is, tracking your behavior, building a profile on you, understanding your interests, what market, what in market kind of groups do you belong to? So are you in the market for a refrigerator or for a car or for a trip to Cancun? That's what, Claire, they're trying to replace that functionality you got it, of understanding who you are so that they can show you targeted ads, right? I'm personally in such a weird place with this, because like my business our business relies on advertising, right? And frankly, like I like targeted ads. Like I bought stuff that I'm like, I didn't know that existed. I wouldn't have searched for that. I had no idea. So I actually like targeted ads, and so like I'm not saying I want cookies to be around, right? Yeah, I prefer. Thank you. So do I, right? So you don't want ads that are it's just a waste of your time, waste of your brain space.
Yeah, and I think that for most of us, like we do prefer to see targeted advertising when it's in areas that would deem to be not sensitive categories. And I think that's where it starts to cross the line into why the privacy regulations are coming into play, because unfortunately, you can do predatory things on these platforms. And that's why there's a lot of spaces inside, like let's just use Google Ads for examples. You can't go in and like do advertising for certain types of criteria, whether it's like credit cards or something like that. It just doesn't let you do sensitive category type targeting, because people were preying on people in a certain demographic and knowing that they would go after them. And it creates a situation where Google knows a lot about you than you realize, and they can pretty much place ads in a place that will make you see them, and they will push you in the direction to do something that somebody may not want to do. So that's where you kind of get into the situation where instead of using cookies, there's like these things, and I'm going to use Flock as an example, even though Google killed off that thing for a replacement for third-party cookies. They had this federated learning of cohorts idea where it was going to be, instead of Google storing like a unique identifier for you across all the sites that you visit that are using their AdSense network or their AdSense network, they would instead like have more of like an explicit, like, here are the interests that you state inside like your Chrome profile, basically. And then they would use that information to infer, like, just help serve the correct ads. But for various reasons, that idea got canned. I have no idea why. Like, you'll never get the answer out of Google for whatever reason. There's probably a lot of politics involved with all that stuff. So can't begin to speculate there, but they're trying to do this, trying to replicate that behavior in a way that's privacy centered, but also not completely killing Google's main revenue model of like advertising too. So they have to do the juggle on their side too.
In a way that's privacy centered, but also giving advertisers, the ability to target their audiences. Right. Yeah. So let's go on to my slide deck, since I spent so much time making it. I'm just kidding. Made it last night. So, all right. What will and won't stop working when third-party cookies go away? I think that this is these are FAQs basically that we get from clients and such. So we wanted to answer the FAQs, right? All right. So here's some potential losers of this third-party cookie ban, right? And I don't know who's in the room here, but like, I'd imagine if you're an advertiser, this doesn't affect you that much, but let me go through them real quick. If you're a publisher who monetizes your site with ads, your estimated, CPM, your revenue per 1,000 impressions will likely take a hit. And that's because ads are going to become like less targeted. So brands or advertisers are willing to pay less because they know that they don't know for a fact they're getting in front of the audience that they are looking for. And so now they're instead of it being lasered, targeted, is going to be a little bit more of a kind of shotgun. Sorry to use gun analogies, but that's kind of what's happening. And so that's publishers are affected in that way. But then advertisers who rely heavily on like display and programmatic, like if you're buying in-market audiences from data brokers like Bluekai, or you're otherwise doing like in-market audiences on Google or targeting based on behavior, that's going to be affected. And the reason, again, is because the third-party cookies are the things that build that profile on people. So if those go away, the profiles become weaker, and so you're not going to be as laser targeted. Multi-touch attribution, MTA, like I think view through conversions, I believe that they work on third-party cookies. So that makes your attribution a little more difficult. So if you show an ad on, show a video ad on whatever news site, pre-roll, or YouTube, or even Facebook, right? The view through conversion metric I could see going away. And you already see like Google and Meta doing this, where they're giving you modeled conversions, where they're using, they claim to be using like, AI or machine learning to say like, hey, we showed this many ads, we saw this many conversions, but we couldn't, we can't see it all because of privacy. And so we're going to assume that we gave you more conversions, and they're going to report it that way. So you as a marketer, your attribution job is going to get a little bit more difficult, unfortunately. Now, caveat on all of these, and to Claire's question, yes, ad tech world is working on solutions. I'll get into what those are, but they're working on all of these. They're working on solutions for all of these. Yeah. So here's what should stay and who stands to kind of win. Or actually, who stands to win, we already talked about, like the walled gardens. But I think, so I put on here that remarketing and retargeting, I think that's going to stay in some form or fashion. I think, remarketing is going to survive. There's no like consensus one way or the other on this, but I do believe that on the walled gardens, so Google and Facebook, these are, when you hear walled gardens, you think of like Google and Facebook and LinkedIn, frankly, too, because users are logged into those, right? So right now on my browser, I'm logged into Facebook, I'm logged into Google, I'm logged into LinkedIn. So in that way, there is a way for those platforms to track you. and therefore, like, you can do one-to-one, not one-to-one retargeting. If you do remarketing today, you already know that in order for remarketing to work, you need a list size, greater than 100. The platform numbers vary, but so you already need like a certain amount of visitors, and that starts to enable some privacy that way. But anyhow, also good news, Google Analytics and conversion tracking on your website, that's going to stay. That uses first-party cookies. So, that's good. First-party cookies are not in the crosshairs. You'll still see your page paths, your conversions, etc. But audience and demographic data may take a hit. I've not been able to find like deterministic answer on that, but I could see that taking a hit, or otherwise becoming more not generalized, like more cohorted. So it already is like that. Like, if you don't get enough traffic, you're not getting this data anyway. So I could see the data being taken away, basically, like being more less granular and more broad, is what I'm saying. So if you have, let's say you have 100 users that come to your site, and the majority of them are in a certain age range, but then you have like 5 or 6 in another age range. Today you might see that in your Google Analytics or in other like analytics platforms, but tomorrow you won't see it. After third-party cookies, you won't see that smaller group, because they're removing the granularity for privacy reasons. And then site personalization should work, because assuming you're not relying on third-party data, because that will use first-party data and first-party cookies. And the real good news is paid search and other search channels like Bing, for instance, should be much less impacted, because those are intent-based, right? Someone's going to there and start searching, I want a Cancun trip, right? Or I want red shoes, basketball shoes, or whatever. So the intent is there, and the ads can be shown. So that's good news.
Although, to your point, Arsham, just one thought there. On paid search, they did recently reduce the granularity of search terms, right?
Yes.
So yeah, that could be another step that Google's taking in the direction of moving towards that privacy-centric world, and unfortunately giving us advertisers a little bit less granular data to work.
So what Jared's talking about here is this trend has been happening for a long time. The reason we're doing this again is because it's like, there's a big change happening with these third-party cookies. Luckily, we have some time, but frankly, like Safari and Firefox have already banned third-party cookies or blocked them by default. So you already have some percentage, like 30-ish% of the browsers doing this. There's the other 70% that's about to go away, and that's why we're talking about this. Let me real quick, Derek. Look, I remember, and Derek, you remember this too. Jared, you probably do too. It was back in 2000, whatever. It was 2011 that Google took away the query report, keywords report in Google Analytics. You used to be able to see in analytics the actual queries, like very granular queries.
Glory days.
Glory days. Like, you would see one person search this weird search term. You don't see that anymore. You don't see that even in AdWords. They've been taking away, data from marketers for some time, and that's the trend continues, basically.
Yeah, and it's going back to what you mentioned about Safari and Firefox. That's a really good point, because it really depends on what your business's demographic is. If you know that you have heavy mobile users, the chances are that you probably already been taking a big hit, because there's a ton of people that have iPhones, being probably the most popular ones, even over, I would say, Android for the most part, as a demographic for who owns what type of phone. And most people don't use a non-Safari browser, I would think, on their iPhone.
I do.
So it's,
I use Chrome.
I know you do. I use multiple, but we're not these.
Yeah,
typical.
I know.
We're a little bit weird in that regard.
Correct.
So I mean, the chances are that you've been operating off like this sample data set for quite some time, and you're just not realizing it. If your entire audience is desktop Chrome users, you can expect a much larger hit whenever that happens, and you'll see the windfall from that a lot harder than if you have a more distributed mix of
Yeah,
browsers too. So you kind of have to look at it that way too.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things I'm going to tell you is like know your audience. It's one of the tips coming up in a couple slides. But like that's to Derek's point. Like you got to know your audience, and luckily we have the tools today to tell us who that audience is, and then you're kind of cross-referencing that to like the implications of, okay, I have a lot of Safari users. Well, they're already third-party cookies are already blocked, so programmatic probably not going to work very well for me. Hypothetically, like that might be a thought process, right? So yeah, the things are going to change. One call out is just you got to stay tuned, right? We'll continue to bring you changes as they happen, and the implications and what you can do about it. We have clients that we're helping through these changes now, and we'll continue. But basically, you got to stay tuned because this is changing, as I'll show you in a couple slides, in the next slide actually as well. So attribution, measurement, frequency capping, suppression, insight, segmentation, all these things are going to be affected, right? And again, ad tech is working on solutions for this. So let's talk about those solutions. Claire, you asked the question. Here we are to answer. What are the alternatives to third-party cookies on the horizon? So ad tech world is frantically building solutions to satisfy the balance of advertisers, publishers, and privacy advocates, and privacy regulators as well. The most scrupulous of which is fingerprinting. This is where they're using lots of different data to figure out who you are. So for instance, like your IP address and what kind of computer you're using and what kind of browser you're using, and other things. How zoomed in your browser is, things like that, to like figure out, hey, this profile is Arsham, and so when I see that on different sites, I'll know that that's Arsham, right? That's kind of creepy and unscrupulous, let's call it. And also, I'm pretty sure that, and Derek would know better, that it's already being like shot down, beat up by privacy advocates and regulators. So, and again, and also, like, this is not something that you as an advertiser, I assume we have advertisers in the room mostly, or publishers, like, this is something that ad tech would use, and they would market to advertisers and say, hey, look, like, we have this technology, we can get to your audience and pay us more, use our network. But then you also have Unified ID 2.0. This is with the Trade Desk. So the Trade Desk is, they started this and they're open sourcing it. And what they're doing is saying, hey, all these publishers, you guys let's band together, share our first party data within, securely with this unified ID kind of hub, and that's going to help us improve targeting. So we're going to know who these people are, but it will be in a privacy first way, and ad tech is going to build this with publishers, right? So publishers will opt in or whatever, and then ad tech will kind of use it and be in the middle of it. Then you have Google with their privacy sandbox. This is kind of like unified ID in a way, in that like it's Google started it, they're open sourcing it, and they're trying to make it like the de facto solution for keeping some kind of profile on people so that we can target them. And this is an API based solution. It's server side. It doesn't use the browser, right? It's going to connect servers to servers, not browsers to servers. And the problem with browsers to servers is that's where like some whatever hacking and not so good things can happen, basically. And that's the reason why third-party is going away, third-party cookies. And then there's server-side tracking. I don't want to get into the details, but again, it's similar, where you're going to share data between you and the ad tech or ad platforms. And for both of these, like, there's going to be some development required, but there's going to be some benefits too, and we'll get into that. So, okay, that's a little bit more detail, but I don't want to get into all the nuance again, because it's all changing, right? Like even this privacy sandbox, Google used to have this thing called Flock. Derek mentioned it, federated learning of cohorts. Like that was there, and then it's gone. It's replaced with this thing called Topics. And I could go into the details of Topics, but that could be gone tomorrow. So back to my shout out, stay tuned, right? Like tune into this stuff every once in a while, and we'll give you the updates, right? In the meantime, how do I, as a marketer, future-proof my campaigns? Let's talk about that. The first and probably the most important thing you got to do is gather more first-party data. So this is data, first-party data. If you don't know what it is data that you own. So think about like your CRM, right? Your CRM is data that you own and you can use in different ways, and I'll show you those, to offset some of the potential damage that comes from this third-party cookie ban, right? So your goal is to build like this identity graph. You can Google that in the digital marketing space, and you can learn more about that. But the point of that, simplified, is basically you want to have more email addresses and mobile phone numbers on file meaning in your CRM. So however you capture email addresses, mobile phone numbers today, your goal is to like get more of them. So why do you want that? What can you do with that data? You can good question. Nicole Kelly is here. Hi, Nicole. Good to see you. I don't see you, but there she is. Hi, Nicole. It's so good to see you. Long time. Let me tell you guys real quick. So high impact things you can do. You can share that data with the ad platforms to do retargeting, to build lookalikes, customer match. Also on this bulleted list should be conversion tracking using server-side conversion. And then you can analyze your data to better understand your target market, right? So the more data you get, more first-party data you get, you can better speak. You can understand your audience. What are they looking for? Why are you different? So that you can change your messaging and your positioning in your copy and your creative, in your advertising and on your website, and in all the touch points with your customers or prospects.
Yeah, and on that point, like there's like building like your initial lookalike audience stuff where you build out like this big list of people that you know to be good, let's just say ICP type criteria from your own first party database. There's also the other side of that where you use your own data that you push into the platform, let's say like Google Ads conversions, right? They are starting to introduce the means to provide first party data to each Google as you go, instead of like continually having to keep uploading like lookalike lists. Whenever somebody converts on your website and you know that that criteria matches whatever that criteria should be, you can send that data to Google in like a hashed format for like email address, for example. And then Google can take that hashed email and say, okay, for this particular user, what demographics do they fall under? Because we know things about them. So instead of like having to just kind of keep continuously like uploading lists and things like that, once you get a quality data stream going to Google, the idea would be, and I'm using Google as an example here, but you can do the same thing with Facebook, right? The idea would be you keep feeding that data into Google for the positive outcomes, and then it should, with its own machine learning and AI capabilities, adjust and find the people inside its own identity graph that it has, right? That's the core concept of how things are moving.
So what Derek is saying is like Google and Meta, I'm using Meta and Facebook interchangeably, sorry. They have the biggest identity graphs in the world. They have all the data, right? Verizon might compete, but Google and Facebook or Meta have the identity graphs. They know a ton about your users. So when you tell them this person converted and that's worth this much to me, you're training their algorithms to go and find more people like that. So that's why you want that first party data, and to be able to share it and know how to share it, with the in the right formats and the right time, the right values back to the ad platforms. So I should have put that in here, but I got more slides. Nicole, what do you mean by a good source of mobile numbers? You mean like something like Zoom Info or Sales Intel, like something that gives you? Yeah, that would be. I don't personally know. Jarrett might.
Yeah, Zoom Info is okay for mobile numbers. Sales Intel, I think touts, we're currently using them, and they've had a higher mobile rate. But yeah, there are tools out there that are more specifically for sourcing that data. As far as like the implications in terms of like regulations like TCPA for like sourcing that data and then just using it, you know, it's kind of a gray area, right?
Yeah.
So probably the best bet is if you can generate opted-in mobile numbers, that's going to be the safest way to engage with those users. And there are very specific regulations, especially around mobile. But as far as like just sourcing for like outbound purposes, I'd say Sales Intel or tools like that are pretty solid.
Yeah. I need to great source of information. Yeah, I completely agree with, as marketers, gonna need, you know, great source of information. Yeah, I agree with that. I think another implication to this third-party data world ban is like that information, the quality information is going to get more expensive. Like everyone and their mom has, you know, data that they'll sell you today because it's just so ubiquitous. But yeah, like after Chrome bans third party, yeah, it's going to get more expensive. I wish I had one. I don't. If you find one, let me know, and I'll do the same for you, Nicole.
And I think, I didn't mean to cut you off, I think it might be a slight audio delay. I think that the biggest impact this is going to have, and I'm coming from like a little bit of a dummy perspective because I'm not the ones that build the one that builds the campaigns out, but I think it's going to really impact smaller companies more because they're not going to have as much first party data first and foremost, because they just don't have the volume to provide, right? To give that, or to provide like these big platforms like that initial data graph or that identity graph of like what kind of people are best suited for their audience, right? So starting up cold on Google Ads instead of like being able to say, I want to target these people that are interested in XYZ in this particular demographic is going to become much harder. And well, it's going to become, I don't know if it's going to become harder, it's going to become less efficient, right? Because they're going to still let you do that.
The display advertising,
yeah, the display stuff, right. Yeah,
and then as such,
speaking about that.
Yeah, and as such, paid search, which is intent-based, usually, you know, mid to bottom funnel, is going to become hypothetically more expensive because everyone's going to, you know, be there if they're not already. Right. So yeah, I mean, I foresee all that happening too. But let's help out and say, okay, you're telling me to get more first party data. How do I do that? We love quizzes, wizards, and multi-step forms because, you know, interactive experiences like a quiz or wizard, like they're going to perform better than the old and tired web form, right? The old and tired web form, anytime I see a landing page with form on the right, I cringe, but I'm also like opportunity, right? We gotta do better than the form on the right, right? And the good news is when you do interactive experiences like a quiz or you know, whatever, a wizard or whatever, you can ask your audience relevant questions that help you customize their experience, right? Whether it's something you show them on the site based on an answer, or an email segmentation that you do based on something they answered. You know, there's so much you can do with that data, and you can also judge the lead quality. So one thing that we've been doing for clients that have enough volume is what we'll do is, let's say you're getting 100 form submissions every month. Okay, you get 100 form submissions a month. Well, some percentage of those are salespeople or students, right? So we want to weed them out. And then some percentage are just unqualified. Maybe they don't have, maybe you're a home contractor and they don't have enough, you know, windows to replace, or maybe their company size isn't big enough for your company to work with. So what we've been doing is asking those questions in a quiz-like format, and then only firing the conversion pixel or telling Google, Facebook, or the ad platforms that this was a conversion only when they meet the lead criteria, the lead quality criteria. So no longer are we telling Google, hey, 100 people filled out the form and some of them were not qualified. We're telling them only 70 filled out the form and they were all qualified. So that's another thing you can do to train the algorithms, and that's what Derek was also alluding to. And then look, the old tried and true lead magnet, you got to exchange value for email. Nicole out there will tell you the quality of content and creative only becomes more important, has always been important, only becomes more important in a first party world. So investing in quality content, quality creative is going to serve you well moving forward. There's a couple other things you should probably do looking forward is audit your advertising stack, zoom into like, display programmatic, wherever you're activating third-party data, ask those partners like, hey, what are you doing about third-party cookies, right? What's your plan? And also start looking into consent management platforms. You might be already using these, especially if you're multinational. If you're not, if you're US only, there's going to come a day where you're going to need to, every website is going to have to use a consent management platform. These are those pop-ups that are like, hey, accept my cookies. Hey, we use cookies, please accept the cookies or customize your cookies, right? Yeah, and make sure that they're set up correctly. We've seen cases where it's like you'll decline all cookies, but then all the JavaScript, it doesn't do anything. All the JavaScript still fires, whereas it should be if you decline, none of that JavaScript fires. So anyway,
yeah, that's a good point on that CMP stuff, because this used to just be mostly an issue in the EU, right? With like the GDPR, the e-privacy stuff. And it bled into California for the CCPA, and it was like it's a much different regulation than the e-privacy and stuff like over in the EU. But now we're starting to see it pop up in Colorado, Virginia, New York. There's new talks about a global, or not a global, a nationwide or US-based like privacy initiative similar to the e-privacy type stuff that's in the works as well. Don't have a lot of detail about anything like that yet, but it's coming to our shore here in the US especially. So it's something that we kind of need to get ahead of and be more cognizant of, because
it's coming.
Times are changing. So you just you have to do it. It kind of stinks, but we shall survive.
Exactly. So that's that. And then, we also get like, what's the one thing I should do? Well, I already talked about it. And it really depends like who you are, where you are in kind of your marketing maturity and such, like if you're a publisher or advertiser, but the main thing is get more first party data. So investing in, quality content, quality creative, and understanding your users. This is the same slide. Where is it? Anyhow, understanding your users, so you can better speak to them, and using that data. You got to just get more first party data at the end of the day, and the way you can do that is quizzes and quality content that people will exchange their mobile number or their email address for, right? This is the slide I was looking for. Sorry.
Which is kind of why, like I mentioned earlier, I think it's going to affect the smaller companies than it is the larger ones, because you're talking about like a volume play at some point. And a lot of times what you're trying to do with your advertising is to give that boost to your overall, just people getting eyes on your product, right? But you want to get the proper eyes on your product or on your website in the first place. So it's this weird situation where by doing this, or by this happening, you're taking a lot of power away from like small companies for being able to compete with giant monolith like companies like Coca-Cola that have an unlimited budget that don't really need to worry about this stuff. And they probably really don't, because they are just big behemoths and they don't really care about like knowing nitty gritty how well things are optimizing to. They just have general budget numbers and they just throw money at the wall and have stuff sticks for the most part. I won't say that's 100% true all the time, but
there's definitely
it's a lot different. It's very different for a small company versus a large enterprise.
There's definitely truth to what you're saying, but also consider, Derek, like I don't know if you guys know, like Google, the reason Google is so amazing, and Facebook, frankly, is because they enabled the small advertiser to be competitive, right? It used to be that it was magazines and billboards, and if you didn't have $100,000, you couldn't run one, right? And if you're a small mom and pop shop, like you couldn't run any advertising. But now, you got $100, you can run some paid search, right? So and Facebook, kind of similar. But
I guess what I was trying to describe was the funny thing is you need to have more first party data.
Yes.
So in order to do this, but so you're in the situation where you need first party data, but you need the traffic to get you the first party data. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So like
it's kind of an oxymoron.
So this is another this is another one, right? It's like, okay, in Google's words, the KPI and the data you share is going to be a competitive advantage. It's like you could just take it away. It's like KPI data you share is a competitive advantage. And what Derek is saying is, like, generally speaking, you have, you know, smaller companies have less data, unfortunately. So that's why it's like we got to get more data, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and there's some cool stuff in this slide deck too that we talked about. Like, everyone does this, where it's
Yeah.
like, you know, this is today's optimization, you know, landing page, you know, people fill out name, email, and then we fire the conversion pixel. But like in the future, what we recommend doing is landing page, same form fields, but only if field number 4 is X and field 5 is greater than Y, it's, you know, is a yes, field 6 is a yes, only then do we fire the pixel. So this is, you know, just a use case there. But I'm going to stop there. Thank you for listening to us talk. Thank you for the questions in the chat. Are there other questions that anyone has out there?
Yeah,
I can
Arsham, I'll just
answer?
add,
Yeah, please.
you know, I think one thing that's interesting, we're seeing a lot of companies doing now, HubSpot is a great example of this, is essentially becoming a media company. So buying up podcasts, buying up publications, they bought The Hustle.
Right.
You know, one reason they're obviously doing that is because they want to reach the people that those media already have access to, right? However, in light of this conversation, another major strategic reason that these companies are making this move is to grow their first-party data sets, right? So as a marketer, I think it's also important to think about how can you be or become at some level a provider of media for your space, become in some sense a media company so that you can build an audience, right? Maybe those people aren't ready to buy from you today, but you're creating that sort of pool of people in your first party data set for the future so that when the third-party cookies inevitably go away, you're not left out in the cold.
Very good point. Very good point. I mean, yeah, very good point. Basically, like, goes back to that creating quality content. That could be in the form of media. That could be in the form of like top of funnel type, you know, content to get people into your community so that they, you know you, trust you, and therefore when they are ready, they convert with you. I think the way I would say is, like, it's third-party cookies made internet advertising kind of like easy in a way for brands to get in front of the audiences that are the right demographics, or they're in the market for what they have, and, you know, at the cost of user privacy. And so that is now, you know, being shifted with the privacy trend. So yeah, thank you all. Rob, thank you for the thanks. Yeah, if anyone has questions, we're here for you. Otherwise, we can give you 5 minutes back in your hour too. Yeah.
I'll wrap in a couple of final thoughts. First of all, Arsham, Derek, thank you so much. This was fantastic. Next week, we're going to be talking about some ideas related to this topic that we discussed today, but specifically around how you can start generating higher quality leads for your campaigns, right? So moving from that, you know, sort of optimization where everything, like every lead is created the same, to being more selective and how we optimize and how we really find those cream of the crop leads and train the algorithms towards that. So we have a really exciting session on that coming up next week that'll build on what we learned here today. So if you're able to join us, I think it's one you won't want to miss. So hope to see you there.